The fluorescent lights hummed, their monotonous tune in the sterile conference room of TechCore Industries, but nobody noticed. 30 of the brightest engineering minds in Silicon Valley sat in crushing silence, staring at the blinking red error message that had held their multi-million-dollar AI system hostage for 72 hours. Empty coffee cups littered the mahogany table like casualties of war. Marcus Chen, the lead architect, had dark circles under his eyes that seemed to swallow his face. His hands trembled slightly as he typed another command that would inevitably fail. Outside those walls, 3,000 employees couldn't access their workstations. Clients were threatening lawsuits. The stock price was plummeting, and nobody, absolutely nobody, could figure out what had gone wrong. It started on a Tuesday morning when the entire system crashed during a routine update. What should have been a simple software patch turned into a nightmare that exposed every limitation of human brilliance. These weren't just any engineers. They were MIT graduates, Stanford PhDs, people who had built systems that powered half the internet. Yet here they sat, humbled and defeated by lines of code that refused to cooperate. Marcus had called in favors from competitors. Experts flew in from Seattle, Boston, and Austin. Each one examined the problem with confident swagger that slowly dissolved into confused frustration. The system wasn't just broken. It was broken in a way that defied logic, as if the machines had decided to rebel against their creators. By day 3, desperation had set in. The CEO, Richard Westbrook, paced the hallway outside, fielding angry calls from the board. Inside, the engineers had divided into factions, each convinced their approach was correct, each growing more defensive as their solutions failed. Fingers pointed, voices raised. The collegial atmosphere of innovation had curdled into something bitter and accusatory. Maybe we need to completely rebuild from backup, suggested Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, her voice hoarse from arguing. That'll take weeks we don't have, Marcus shot back. His patience worn to nothing. Nobody noticed when Maria Santos pushed her delivery cart past the conference room's glass walls. Why would they? She was just part of the scenery, the invisible infrastructure that kept their world running. Every day at 2:30, Maria delivered mail and packages to each floor of the TechCore building. She knew the rhythm of this place better than most people who actually worked there. Maria was 53, though people often guessed older. Life had etched itself into her face through years of double shifts and sacrificed dreams. She'd come to America from the Philippines 20 years ago, with a nursing degree that nobody here would recognize. So she delivered packages, cleaned offices at night, and sent money home to her mother and sister. She never complained. Complaining was a luxury she couldn't afford. But Maria noticed things. She noticed when people were stressed, when they skipped lunch, when they stayed too late. She noticed the young programmer on the 5th floor who looked sad. So she started leaving encouraging notes with his packages. She noticed when the cleaning crew missed the plants in the lobby, so she watered them herself. These small acts of attention were her way of planting kindness in concrete. As she passed the conference room that Thursday afternoon, Maria paused. The tension was visible even through the glass. She'd watched this group deteriorate over the past 3 days. Their confident energy replaced by something that looked like despair. Her cart held a package for Mr. Chin. She could have left it outside, but something made her knock gently on the door. "Not now!" someone shouted. Maria opened the door anyway, apologizing softly. "So sorry to disturb. Package for Mr. Chin." Marcus barely looked up. "Just leave it anywhere." But Maria's eyes had caught the massive display screen at the front of the room, the one showing the system architecture and the blinking error. She set down the package, and for a moment, she just looked at the screen with that quiet attention she brought to everything. "You know what that reminds me of?" she said softly, almost to herself. The room went quiet. Several engineers looked up with barely concealed irritation. Who was this delivery woman to comment on their crisis? "What?" Marcus asked, his tone sharper than he intended. "The electrical panel in my apartment building," Maria said. "Last month, everyone on 3 floors, we have no power. Landlord brings electrician, then another electrician, then the supervisor. They check everything, change parts, test wires. Nothing works. Everyone getting angry, food spoiling in refrigerators. You know what was the problem?" Nobody answered. They stared at her with a mixture of confusion and impatience. "The main switch," Maria continued. Someone pushed it to off by accident when moving furniture. All that expertise, all those tools, and nobody thought to check if the power was simply turned off at the source. She pointed at the screen. At a small status indicator in the corner that nobody had been looking at. That small light there, the green one? It should be green, yes? For system active? Marcus leaned forward. His heart began to pound. The indicator Maria was pointing to was so insignificant, so basic, that it had become invisible to them. It was the manual override switch, a failsafe installed years ago and never used. It existed in the system's deepest settings, a relic from an earlier architecture that nobody thought about anymore. With shaking hands, Marcus navigated to the system's root controls. There, buried under layers of sophisticated code, was the manual override, and it was toggled to off. "How did—" he whispered. "During the update," Patricia breathed, understanding flooding her face. "The system must have defaulted to manual mode as a safety measure, and needed us to explicitly re-enable automatic control." Marcus clicked the toggle. The room held its breath. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then, like a sleeper waking, the system hummed to life. Green lights cascaded across the display. Status reports flooded in. Everything was working. The conference room erupted. Engineers jumped from their chairs, shouting with relief and disbelief. Some laughed, some looked like they might cry. Marcus leaned back in his chair and covered his face with his hands. In the chaos, Maria quietly picked up her cart to leave. But Marcus's voice stopped her. "Wait, please wait." The room fell silent as he stood and walked toward her. Up close, Marcus could see the tiredness in her eyes, the worn patches on her uniform, the dignity she carried despite everything suggesting the world had asked too much of her. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Maria Santos, sir. I deliver packages and mail." "Maria Santos," Marcus repeated. "Do you understand what you just did?" 72 hours. 30 engineers. Consultants we paid thousands of dollars per hour. And you solved it in 30 seconds. Maria looked embarrassed. "I just saw something that reminded me of something else. My problem was simple." "I thought maybe yours was simple too." "But how did you even know what you were looking at?" Patricia asked, genuinely curious. Maria shrugged. "I clean the offices at night. Sometimes I read the monitors, the books people leave open. I like learning things, even if I don't understand everything. And I watch people work. You all are very smart, but sometimes when people are very smart, they think the answer must be very complicated. Sometimes the answer is just simple." Richard Westbrook had entered the room during the commotion. He'd heard the last part of Maria's explanation. "Ms. Santos," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you've saved this company. Do you know how many jobs you've saved? How many families?" Maria smiled softly. "I just helped turn something back on, sir." "No," Marcus said firmly. "You did more than that. You saw what we couldn't see because we were too close, too convinced of our own expertise. You reminded us that sometimes the most sophisticated problem has the simplest solution. Word spread through TechCore like wildfire. By the end of the day, Maria's story had reached every floor. Employees she'd been delivering, packages to for years, suddenly saw her differently. They started saying hello, asking about her day, learning her name. But the real change came the following Monday. Richard called Maria to his office. She arrived nervous, wondering if she'd somehow overstepped. Instead, she found Marcus, Patricia, and several other engineers waiting with Richard. "Miss Santos," Richard began, "we've spent the weekend talking. Your insight saved this company, roughly $8 million, in losses and immeasurable damage to our reputation. More importantly, you taught us something we should never have forgotten. That expertise without humility is blindness, and that wisdom can come from anywhere." He slid a check across his desk. Maria's eyes widened. It was for $50,000. "We can't give you what you truly deserve," Richard continued, "because how do you put a price on saving a company? But this is a start. It's a bonus with our profound gratitude." Maria's hands shook as she picked up the check. $50,000. She could fix her mother's house, help her sister's children with school, maybe even take a single class toward recertifying her nursing degree. "There's more," Marcus said gently. "We'd like to offer you a position in our quality assurance department. You have an eye for what others miss. We need that. It comes with full benefits. tuition reimbursement if you want to pursue any education, and triple your current salary. Tears slipped down Maria's cheeks. She tried to speak but couldn't. 20 years of being invisible, of being overlooked, of knowing she had more to offer but never being asked. And now this. "Why?" she finally whispered. "Why are you being so kind?" "Because you were kind," Patricia said softly. "You didn't have to stop. You didn't have to look at our problem. You didn't have to share your story. You did it because kindness is just who you are. That's the person we want working with us." Maria accepted. Her first project was working with the engineering team to create a new protocol, the Fresh Eyes Review. Before deploying any major system, someone from outside the engineering department, preferably someone with no technical background, would be asked to look at the system and ask simple questions. What does this do? Why does it work this way? Could it be simpler? The protocol became famous in tech circles. Other companies adopted it. Articles were written about the Maria Santos Principle, the idea that expertise must be balanced with humility, and that the most valuable perspective sometimes comes from those we least expect. But for Maria, the greatest change was smaller and more personal. She thought about that moment in the conference room, about how close she'd come to just leaving the package and walking away. What if she hadn't stopped? What if she'd convinced herself that these smart people didn't need anything from someone like her? She realized that every person carries value beyond what the world recognizes. Every act of attention, every moment of caring, every simple observation might be exactly what someone needs. Her years of noticing, of paying attention to details others overlooked, hadn't been wasted. They'd been preparing her for a moment when those skills would matter. A year later, Maria graduated with her recertified nursing degree, thanks to the tuition reimbursement program. She split her time between the Quality Assurance Department and volunteering at a community health clinic. The engineers threw her a graduation party, and Marcus gave a toast. "To Maria," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that being smart isn't enough. You have to be wise, you have to be humble, and you have to be kind." She fixed our system in seconds, but she changed our culture forever. Maria stood before her colleagues, no longer invisible, no longer overlooked. She thought about all the delivery women, the janitors, the security guards, the cafeteria workers who keep the world running while rarely being seen. She thought about how much wisdom exists in quiet corners, waiting only for someone to ask, to listen, to notice. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for seeing me." But everyone in that room knew the truth. Maria had always been worth seeing. They'd just finally learned to look.